house in Baltimore, and Matt Ryan and the Falcons wilted under the heat of Tom Brady. But I tell you, I thought it'd take me a little while to get back onto the horse and watching the Caps and watching the Terps. But boy, the Wizards did not take long in creating some drama of their own on Monday night with LeBron James in D.C. Here to talk all things NBA, a guy that covers the game as well as anyone in the world. You can follow him at basketballinsiders.com as well as out on his Twitter. He is a long-time participant here at WNST. We welcome Steve Kyler back on. It's Steve Kyler NBA out on Twitter as well. Boy, Steve, you and I have been talking about the Wizards a long time, since they were the Bullets, quite frankly. Monday night really felt like some sort of an awakening, and believe me, when you win 17 games in a row at home, when you've moved into first place, all of that, I don't say it happened quietly, but I think the Wizards are one of those franchises that for a long, long time have tried to somehow instill some passion in a fan base in an area. I think Monday night was an awakening.
It was, and I think it was also a good measuring stick. I think you saw that it comes down to the wire. Everybody's playing really well. Bradley Beal played well. John Wall played well. Otto Porter played well. Everybody kind of brought their A game against a Cavs team that looked like they were playing their A game, and it comes down to the wire. And I think that, of all the flaws that the Wizards had early on in the season, I think they figured some things out. And I think you saw they could play with pace. I mean, that was a high-paced basketball game. And the Wizards could hang, and they could hang on both ends of the floor. So I think for me, while not only an awakening, but also kind of saying, you know what, you're not that far away from the best team in the East.
Well, don't all teams that begin to win show that dominance at home? I mean, especially in the NBA, right, where the building becomes something special and a place to be and a tough ticket and all that. Look, we've seen that in all sorts of places, from Utah to, to Portland, to Golden State, to San Antonio. Washington's one of those places. And, man, I can't begin to tell you. I've been here forever. I mean, you got to go back to, like, Jeff Malone and, that sort of era to go back to the fact that, 15, 17,000 people at the old Capitol Center every night, where it really was a tough ticket, where, there was some energy, and Robin Ficker was insulting all the visiting players and like that. We haven't had that in a long, long time, certainly not this century.
Yeah, and the game's a little different, too. I think when you think about, when you're talking about games in the 60s, 70s, even early 80s, the venues were not places that the hit people went to. They didn't have, posh restaurants and luxury bars. So the atmosphere of all games have changed, because at halftime you go into this amazing lounge and have this amazing food and beverage, and if you come back to your seat, you come back to your seat. Where it was, so it's hard for teams to get energy. It's hard for teams to develop that kind of home court crowd.
Well, especially around the floor, right, where the tickets are $500, right?
Yeah, because the first thing they want to do is give you a wristband to send you off the floor, because you'll go spend some money. But, it's tough in the NBA to find a home crowd, and when you can get a little bit of a win streak and you can really do the things like the Wizards have done, over the last couple of weeks, that's a special thing, because it stays. Even after you lose a game or two, the crowd is used to the excitement and wants to be near the court because you believe. And, that's, as you said, the first step to having true success is winning at home. You talk to teams that are very good teams, even the best teams in the NBA, understand that on the best day they're going to go 500 on the road. So they're trying to get, half the road games won. And when you become the tough out, and when the creature comforts of being on the road kind of, catch up with you, that's where you got to put your foot down. That's where you got to win your game. So, it's nice to see what the Wizards have become. This is what they promised us in the off season when they hired Scotty Brooks, and this is what the organization was preaching when they opted not to sign some players in free agency and, kind of invest in the young guys and stay with the young guys, because they saw that they have a pretty bright future, and I think you're seeing it on the floor.
Well, in Beal and in Wall, we knew what we had here, and part of that was getting those guys just to the starting gate and healthy. Obviously Gortat got all the money. Otto Porter's been interesting because drafted into this thing, not a lot in the beginning, not a lot asked. It really feels like this system suits him, and that Scotty Brooks suits him to some degree.
Very much so, and he's become incredibly efficient, and I think that's the big thing, is you want efficient players, because you have high volume players in John Wall and Brad Beal. You need guys that can, one, stretch the floor, and Otto's become a great player in the corner. But, you kind of look at how Scotty Brooks' teams have been when you think about some of the guys that excelled in, Oklahoma City under him, Pablo Cephalosha, Andre Roberson, guys you'd never heard of that were playing big minutes and being very productive. Those guys, the complementary guys, the guys that can do it without the ball in their hands do tend to, come up a little bit under a Scotty Brooks. So, I'd also say I think Kelly Oubre is coming along really well. Scotty liked him quite a bit. I talked during the offseason with Scotty about the roster, and he was very optimistic about what Kelly Oubre could be. And you see moments with him that, he's still a young kid, 19, 20, that he could be that really special fourth player. And now you're talking about something. When you've got the number one and number two guy in Wall and Beal, and Porter is kind of surfaced as the number three guy. Now you got your number four guy in Kelly Oubre, and a lot of vets are going to want to be a part of that. So I think they're building something really good, and I think they've got a chance, especially this year, to make some noise that, hey, they could win the division and end up with home court, and we've seen how they play at home.
You talk about them being attractive, obviously attractive enough for Paul Pierce to get a cup of coffee and hit some ginormous postseason shots because they got to the postseason. The bench was such a problem for them in November and December. Clearly in 17, it's been very, very different. It all changed right around the holidays.
Yeah, I think they, some things settled in. It was funny. I was talking with one of the Wizards guys, in kind of December, and they're like, look, we just got to get right. We got to get right spiritually. We got to get right emotionally. You got to settle into and put all your luggage in the closet and go play. And I think they were managing maybe some, high expectations. I think that was real. Also, they were really kind of talking about, a lot of things didn't matter. Brad Beal was under contract. Who cares what Brad Beal makes? So, a lot of the noise went away and they got to focus, and I think they found some things that worked. And then when it starts to work, you start to believe. And when you start to believe, you start to win.
Well, there's a lot of that going on. I mean, Miami's torrid right now. The Celtics torrid. The Wizards torrid. I mean, there's Indiana's unbelievable. There are teams that are playing some great basketball here lately.
Yeah, again, a lot of young teams that are finding their way and, accepting that, the help isn't coming in the door. It's going to be on the floor. And, Miami, you mentioned Miami, what Goran Dragic and Dion Waiters are doing together, those two guys together is amazing. And I'd argue that, Goran Dragic may be the best shooting point guard in the East, and maybe not one of the best in the game. But he's not getting any attention because, Miami Heat were supposed to be bad, and now they're quietly sneaking into maybe the 8th seed. And Boston is just, it's unbelievable what Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens have built with that team, because you run down the list and not a lot of heralded drafty guys. It's not Andrew Wiggins. It's Jaylen Brown. Nobody wanted Jaylen Brown at 3. Nobody wanted Terry Rozier at 16. And these guys are productive and producing, and a lot of it has been, the development under Brad Stevens. And I think the Celtics are showing you how you build with a young team. Is you got to be patient. You got to stick with your coach. You got to stick with your young guys. Don't trade them off at the first second. Stay your course, and you can have some success. Both of those teams incredibly good for a lot of the same reasons Washington has been good.
He is Steve Kyler from Basketball Insiders, a veteran presence here at WNST.net. You can find him out at basketballinsiders.com, as well as on Twitter at Steve Kyler NBA. That's Kyler. Back onto the Wizards and back onto the Cavaliers and where the imbalance there is. I mean, look, if you would have given me the Wizards in the playoffs the last couple of years, to think that they could beat Cleveland once in a 12-game series, I would find that to be somewhat far-fetched based on Cleveland on their best day. The fact that it went overtime, the fact that it was exciting, does that really breathe life into the fact that if the Wizards wind up being let's say a 4 seed or a 5 seed or whatever, and they wind up seeing Cleveland in a second round or whatever, that you really believe they can take games away from the Cavaliers? Did Monday night impress that upon you?
Well, yeah, but I would also tell you I've talked to players about this, and, look, you get confidence every time you can compete against somebody. The more times, Nestor, I can go against you and get the better of you, then the more comfortable I feel about competing against you. And when you can take a team like the Cavs, and some of it is, you got to look at the situation, it's middle of the season where you're really getting the Cavs' best game. J.R. Smith's not in the lineup. They are a little injury depleted in terms of how they're managing minutes and things like that. So did you really get the Cavs' best punch? But the truth of it was, it looked like you did. All the key guys were out on the floor and were playing. LeBron played well. Kyrie played well. you're talking about guys that played well, and you were right there, and you were a couple of shots away. And one, it gives you game film to go back and look at and really kind of dissect, and then two, it gives you the confidence that you're not that far away. And sometimes the game of basketball does come down to confidence. And when you think about some of these great college kids that come into the NBA and never make it, is because they never get confident in this environment. So, confidence does play a huge part in success. And I think what I saw from the Washington Wizards was a team that's ready to play. And they were ready to play against anybody, and they've been that way for a couple of weeks, actually most of the month. So to me, I look at them as a team that, look, you want to overlook them, good luck to you, because they're going to come, and they're going to come fast, and they're going to come hard, and you're not ready, the Wizards will run you out of the building.
Steve, for the West, it's Golden State, obviously, and, anything begins and ends with them, but this little run by the Utah Jazz has been fascinating, right?
Yeah, but this is, quietly, this is who Utah was supposed to be. They've taken their lumps. They've done the process, and we always talk about Philly in the process. But, the Jazz did this. They made the decision to go after Quinn Snyder as a head coach. They bring in Dennis Lindsey from the Spurs organization, and they decided they were going to build this thing through youth. Now, they made a couple of trades, certainly going and getting Derek Favors and, going after George Hill this last summer, gave them some veterans. They signed, Joe Johnson, and, to a pretty big deal, but not a crazy deal, to bring some veterans in there. But it was about being patient with how long it was going to take for Rodney Hood, how long it was going to take for Gordon Hayward, how long it was going to take for Rudy Gobert. And they didn't try to rush the process. And, they've been incrementally getting better, and their window is coming open. And now they're becoming a team that not only should be in the playoffs, but is likely going to be a force in the playoffs. They can beat teams in the West. And they're probably not getting out of the first round, but considering where they were 2 years ago looking at lottery picks, they're in pretty good shape.
Well, speaking about getting out of the first round, I was down in Houston. They played 4 games there at home in the week during the Super Bowl, and that little DMZ there, everybody was coming in to play them. They're also playing a great brand of basketball. There's a great enthusiasm for the Rockets that I saw in Houston last week.
Yeah, that team is so fun. They just jack up shots from the perimeter. They have put up more three. They have three players that are top 10 in the NBA, and 3 points made and attempted. They just rain from the perimeter, and they're going to make you play. They're going to make you play in every facet of the game. And you think about Mike D'Antoni and the Houston Rockets, you always, they're not going to play any defense. They're very good defensively, especially late in games, and they've got the right mix. They're playing loose and comfortable, but more importantly, they're playing together. That locker room's a very tight-knit group. Last year, those guys, as soon as the buzzer was done, were headed towards doors in the opposite end of the building. Those guys are very different now, and a lot of it is James Harden. I think he is the MVP. The one thing about James is that he really took the criticism and all of the issues last year very personally. He got in the gym, worked on his body, worked on his game, worked on his handle. He's running the points for them and leading the league in assists. So, James Harden has become an incredible player, and what the Houston Rockets are doing organizationally is impressive, because it really is justifying the money ball thing, because they are shooting threes. They're not playing in the middle. They don't take mid-range shots. So all the things that the spreadsheet guys have been talking about plays out in Houston every night, and it works.
Loyola Marymount, right?
Yeah, look, we're not trying. We're in the math guys will tell you, 33% from 3 is better than 50% from 2, and if you do the numbers, it's true. And they're just trying to make sure they get enough threes up. And if you are a fan of shooting, they have some of the best shooters in basketball, no question.
Steve Kyler joining us here from Basketball Insiders. He's also at Steve Kyler NBA out on Twitter, talking a little NBA, especially on the backside of that incredibly thrilling Monday night game with LeBron James and the Wizards. Last thing for you, I guess for the Wizards, you'd say, where is the depth? Where is the trading deadline? What's the real motion here between now and March 1st for teams trying to settle in and pick up something that will be a difference maker, especially for the teams that expect to be in the tournament?
Yeah, very much like baseball. We've got kind of 2 seasons now. You get the trade deadline on the 23rd, and then you get the waiver deadline, which is, the buyout guys, the guys that are going to take a little less money to get out of the team they're in. So the Wizards are going to be active in both. I don't think you're going to see the Wizards do anything big. I don't think they're going to be involved in anything that's a splashy player. Where they need help is bolstering the bench. I think they need another scorer, somebody who can really put the ball in the bucket. That's where I think you'll see them go. So if they do trigger a deal, at the deadline. I think it's going to be somebody that maybe you hadn't heard of, or you go, oh, wow, I remember that guy. I don't think it's going to be somebody you're going to run out and buy a jersey for, but that is what they're missing, is that one more guy who can contribute from the bench, and might be an ending contract guy. There are quite a few of those that are going to get moved, but I don't think you're going to see anything super splashy with the Wizards' name on it, because they really like the direction of this team, and Otto Porter is a big part of the future, so they're not going to mess with that in their future cap space.
Well, you wonder where the minutes would come from, right? I mean, who's coming off the floor?
Somebody who's comfortable coming off the bench, so that's a big part of it.
He is Steve Kyler, NBA out on Twitter, and, of course, at Basketball Insights. It's always great catching up with you. It's especially great catching up with you when the Wizards are in first place.
And when they're to have fun conversations.
Hey, dude, let me tell you what. I got back from Houston on Monday night, and I'm a little worn out, right? I mean, I've been talking sports and Radio Row and doing all that. And, my wife and I found ourselves kind of half watching it. I hadn't seen my wife in 10 days. We're catching up and whatnot. And the next thing you know, I'm doing radio, and she's glued to the TV and can't get enough of it. And I'm on my Facebook and Twitter, and everybody I know, these aren't people that are like watching the Wizards on a Tuesday night when they're playing, the Mavericks or whatever. Everyone was watching the game. So I sort of felt the collective when they lost, and people that weren't really vested at 7 o'clock for some reason, right?
Yeah. Totally true.
Well, it's games like that that turn people into fans,
quite frankly.
It's a
team that matters, and right now the Wizards matter.
They did on Monday night, that's for sure. Steve, great having you on, man. Be well.
Anytime, my friend.
You got it. Steve Kyler, NBA out on Twitter, as well as at Basketball Insiders. You can find me out in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. I'm going away for a couple of weeks here. I'm going to have some rock and roll next week. Going to have some sports the week after that. Certainly, if you've tuned in before, you know the quality of the work we're going to put on the radio. But I think if you haven't heard before, if you're new to the program after 25 years, you'll sort of dig the next couple of weeks. My voice is a little squeakier from back in the 1990s when I was talking to David Modell and Ray Lewis, but you pull it back into perspective here, so it'll all be there for you. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.